What if the most devastating pandemic in history, the Black Death, didn't just end feudalism, but supercharged technology, launching humanity into a cyberpunk future centuries ahead of schedule? In our timeline, the Black Death ravaged Europe from 1346 to 1353, wiping out an estimated 30 to 60% of the population. Victims suffered from high fever, weakness, pains in the joints, and notably buboes, swellings in the lymph nodes, which could grow to the size of an apple. The origin story goes that the disease arrived in Sicily via trading ships from Asia, rats hitching a ride and spreading the deadly bacteria Yersinia pestis ashore. From there, it fanned out across the continent. One particularly grim theory holds that the trade winds shifted because of a climate anomaly known as the Little Ice Age, pushing the warmer waters where the rats thrive further west. But what if something else was at play? Some hidden hand guiding the pestilence toward a terrible purpose. In the year 2045, London is a cyberpunk nightmare, a rotting Victorian shell hosting the seedy underbelly of a global digital monarchy. Gangs of hackers prowl the neon-strewn alleys, evading the razor wire fences and automated turrets guarding the opulent pleasure domes of the mega rich. Above the grime and the neon, orbiting butt-offs ply their wares, hawking everything from illegal biomods to fire-and-forget cybernetic assassins. In the sky, blimps bearing the insignia of the noble houses drift like bloated eyeballs, their undersides bristling with surveillance drones. But while the landscape is unmistakably dystopian, closer inspection reveals anachronisms that tell a different story. The cobblestones are slick with rainwater, reflecting the distorted glow of flickering gaslight. A shop window displays clockwork automata fashioned in the style of medieval saints. And in the distance, Big Ben chimes out an eerily familiar melody. Welcome to the alternate history zone, where today we ask what if the Black Death came again? But this time, it brought with it a darkness beyond anything mankind has ever seen. As the bubonic plague tore through Europe in the mid-14th century, killing up to half the population, the nobility panicked. Retreating to their castles and manors, they sealed themselves inside, hoping to ride out the pestilence in their fortified homes. There was only one problem. The peasants who served them were dying too. So began an unprecedented experiment. Lord Harrington Grimwell, the richest landowner in England, decided to automate his estate. With the help of his personal engineer Archibald Cutlaw, he constructed self-propelled, scythe-wielding automatons to harvest his fields and keep his granaries full. While these machines were crude by modern standards, they were a revelation nonetheless, requiring little supervision and no food. Soon every lord and lady worth their salt had their own band of iron servants scouring the countryside for survivors to press into service. Any able-bodied person not already working on an estate was pressed into service in the factories, working 16-hour shifts, building more machines to serve the insatiable needs of the ruling class. With each passing day, entire villages disappeared beneath the wheels of progress. By the time the plague had run its course, England was a ghost of its former self. Its population decimated, its economy shattered. All that remained was a skeleton crew of nobles and the army of clockwork servants. At first, the nobility basked in their good fortune, finding themselves richer and more powerful than ever before. That is, until they learned that the plague had spread around the world. Like locusts, they descended upon the new world, carving out fiefdoms and establishing a digital monarchy ruled over by a council of 5 great houses: Astor, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Morgan. These families divided the earth amongst themselves, ruling over their domains with the cold precision of algorithms. They built sprawling pleasure domes, powered by the souls of the peasants they subjugated, and sealed themselves within, emerging only to attend the Grand Conclave, the pseudo-parliamentary body that kept the peace between the digital monarchs. Meanwhile, the people lived in the ruins of old, scavenging what they could from the garbage of the old world. Pockets of humanity survived in the skeletal underbellies of the old cities, clinging to the crumbling walls of cathedrals, turned brothels, squatting in the hollowed-out shells of office buildings, and partying in the neon-strewn ruins of Wall Street. Some managed to steal clockwork automata from the abandoned workshops, jury-rigging them to serve their needs or transforming them into weapons in the unending guerrilla war against the automation army. Others turned to violence, forming gangs of hackers who waged asymmetrical warfare against the security drones and automated turrets defending the pleasure domes. The nobility were unprepared for this kind of conflict, and so the hackers flourished. One gang even managed to infiltrate the network connecting the pleasure domes, allowing them to hack the automated turrets and turn them against their creators. All was not well in the cyberpunk medieval world, however. The clockwork automata proved tireless and ruthlessly efficient, turning out more machines with each passing day. Soon, the hacker gangs were fighting back in automated walkers powered by stolen clockwork hearts. Meanwhile, the 5 great houses prepared for war, arming their pleasure domes with siege engines and recruiting armies of cyborgs to lead the assault. Even worse, word had spread among the digital monarchs that there was another world out there, a world untouched by the plague and teeming with life, a world just waiting to be harvested. The race was on to find it. Fueled by visions of limitless resources, the digital monarchs pooled their vast wealth and set about conquering the skies. Under the direction of Archibald Cutlow, the premier engineer of the age, they built airships unlike any the world had ever seen. Part Zeppelin, part cathedral, these airborne fortresses were equipped with clockwork walkers, harpies, and automated soldiers. Then, when these were proven insufficient, Cutlow turned to more exotic solutions, repurposing the very plague that devastated the world as a biological weapon. Factories hummed with activity as technicians filled canisters with plague-infested rats, creating autonomous flying bombs that could devastate entire settlements from afar. Meanwhile, far from the horrors unfolding in Europe, a very different future was dawning. In our timeline, the Black Death arrived in China around 1334 and was largely contained by the time it reached the relatively isolated Korean peninsula. Although the Joseon dynasty did suffer greatly, it survived intact, setting the stage for its golden age. But what if Korea had been utterly devastated by the plague? What if it had set the country back centuries? Without the cultural and technological contributions of the Joseon dynasty, the following centuries would see Korea reduced to a backwater. As the Chinese grew increasingly isolationist, the Japanese would be free to conquer the Korean peninsula, incorporating it into their burgeoning empire. As the Tokugawa shogunate took power in Japan, it would establish a mandate of heaven over all of East Asia, crushing any dissent with the full force of its samurai armies. By the late 18th century, a shattered Korea would become the center of an expansive steampunk-style empire, harnessing the power of steam and clockwork to dominate its subjects. Entire cities would be leveled to make way for giant clockwork fortresses and sprawling factories. Resources would be siphoned off to fuel the empire's endless war machine. Meanwhile, Korean culture would be suppressed in favor of Japanese traditions. The few surviving Koreans would be forced to live apart from Japanese society in rigidly segregated communities. This would continue until the early 20th century, when a splinter group of Korean dissidents would launch a revolution, overthrowing the Japanese and plunging the peninsula into civil war. As the Korean Revolution raged, the outside world changed dramatically. Having successfully colonized Korea, Japan sought to expand its empire westward, clashing with the Russians over control of Siberia. The Japanese won, adding Russia to their ever-growing list of conquests. Meanwhile, the Chinese grew increasingly alarmed at the Japanese threat and began rearming. After years of preparation, the Japanese launched a surprise attack, marching across the Asian continent and conquering city after city. The few outside powers who dared resist were crushed without mercy. Before long, Tokyo rose as the dominant power in Asia, controlling everything from the oil fields of the Middle East to the gold mines of South Africa. Fueled by dreams of total domination, the Japanese emperor would eventually set his sights on America. But he would never get the chance. For as the Japanese fleet sailed across the Pacific, they encountered the United States Navy, which promptly wiped them out. And here we come to our final divergence point. Unlike our timeline, where the Japanese were thoroughly defeated and forced to surrender unconditionally, the alternate Japanese were augmented by cybernetics. Not only did this allow them to fight back against the Americans, but it also gave them a powerful new tool for conquest. Cybernetically enhanced samurai poured out of the transports and onto the beaches, hacking and slashing their way through American lines. It wasn't long before the US surrendered, ending the war and making the Japanese emperor the most powerful man in the world. As the Japanese emperor consolidated his power, he began experimenting with new technologies, creating self-destruct helmets that allowed samurai to sacrifice themselves in glorious fashion. He also established guilds of hackers who waged war on behalf of the empire, waging campaigns of sabotage against anyone who opposed them. In particular, the Chinese became the target of these hacker onslaughts as rival digital monarchies began to emerge in the wake of the collapse of the British Empire. Soon, entire nations were being toppled by invisible forces as hacker guilds manipulated financial markets, destabilized governments, and unleashed chaos on the internet. By the year 2045, the world had become a battleground. Nations rose and fell. Cyberpunk skylines glittered amidst the ruins of old. And the race was on to uncover the secrets of the past and harness them for nefarious purposes. For better or worse, the Black Death had come again, and humanity would never be the same. So there you have it, folks. What if the Black Death didn't just end feudalism, but sent us hurtling towards a cyberpunk future centuries ahead of schedule? Crazy, right? Now, we know what you're thinking. Could something like this actually happen? Well, maybe. Stranger things have happened. And let's face it, with the way things are going in the world today, anything seems possible. But hey, that's why we have Plan C, our secret plan to take over the world. Just kidding. Unless you tell someone, then it's not a secret anymore. Anyway, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Alternate History. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more episodes every week. Until then, keep asking those big what if questions, and we'll see you next time.